You're good to go, Mika.
All right, awesome. Okay, so I thought there were people in the waiting room. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being here. Welcome from the Greater Cincinnati Voter Collaborative. We are excited to be able to partner with the Right Question Institute to share some really great information on how we can make registering voters and voter engagement a little more impactful. So we're excited that you've decided to join us. Just to give you, again, my name is Mika Owens. I'm one of the co founders of the Greater Cincinnati Voter Collaborative. And just to give you a little bit of backdrop, we formed quickly in 2020 as a result of us, this nation, voting in a pandemic. And so we wanted to be able to provide information to help voters navigate through voting in that election in a nonpartisan way. So we quickly brought together people who care, organizations who care about civic engagement, 54 nonprofit organizations to help amplify safe, reliable, credible voting resources and information. And we were so excited to come across the information of the Right Question Institute. And just to give you an idea of what our principles are, even though we were moving very fluidly in 2020, which also included registering voters, of course, across the city, but also we developed a transportation to the polls infrastructure that allowed us to get over 100 people to the polls. So our long-term vision is building a more sustainable civic engagement environment here in the city and expanding that to the region. And just to give you an idea of what our principles are, one, racial equity, civic education, voter accessibility, and also accountability. And so, and in addition to that, building capacity in the democratic system. So we hope that you appreciate the information that you'll receive tonight and that you sign up to get involved with what we are doing here locally. And we'll give you all that information here at the end. Justin, co-founder as well, would you like to add anything?
Mika did a wonderful job. Hi, everybody. My name is Justin Kirchner, co-founder of the Greater Cincinnati Voter Collaborative. Again, we appreciate everyone attending tonight to learn how to resonate and connect more deeply with those in the community and voters who are really our neighbors. So we look forward to a good evening. And with that, I will pass it off to Naomi and Luz to get us started.
Thank you, Mika. Thank you, Justin. Let me share my screen here so everyone can see the slides. All right. Welcome, everybody. Luz, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having us. It is exciting to have an opportunity to work with you. I'm Luz Santana, and I'm co-founder of the Right Question Institute, and now also co-director of the Democracy Building Program at RQI.
And my name is Naomi Campbell. I'm the director of the Legal Empowerment Program at RQI. And I help legal professionals use a method for building self-advocacy skills of their clients. And I'm a lawyer by training, but also I'm involved with our other fields of work, including voter engagement, and was heavily involved in our Why Vote initiative last year. And we're just very happy to be here tonight. Thank you, Mika. Thank you, Justin, and to all of you for attending today. So I know that many of you will be seeing this as a recording, so we hope to make it as inclusive as possible for those later viewers, but this will be an interactive webinar, and so if you are viewing the recording, please feel free to go through the exercises that we go through as well as you're watching. So what are we doing in this webinar today? We will be learning about a new model for engaging voters, particularly low propensity voters and voters in low-income communities. And we'll explore a nonpartisan, simple, and powerful tool to help people make the connection between the services and issues that are important to them and voting. And so who can do this work? We'll think about how frontline and direct service workers can play a role in getting more people to vote. And we'll also look at how existing voter engagement efforts can use this tool as just another tool in their toolbox and can integrate it into what they're already doing. And just quickly, an agenda, we'll do some logistics. We'll give you a little background on the work of the Right Question Institute. We'll then walk you through the Why Vote tool for voter engagement, and this is where it will be an interactive webinar. We'll look at components of the tool, why it works, and then we'll be introducing an adaptation for the Cincinnati City Council elections in November. So you'll be experiencing the generic tool, the generic YVote tool that can be adapted to many different circumstances, and then we'll show you what's coming for the Cincinnati City Council. We'll talk a little bit about using the tool in your work, and then we'll do next steps, evaluation, and question and answer. The resources that we'll look at today are under a Creative Commons license, which means you can use them for free. As long as you're crediting RQI, you can come to our website, download resources, and adapt them for your purposes. And that's our job, is to make it as easy to use as possible. So just wanted to share that up front. And as I said, this will be an interactive webinar. We'll sometimes ask you to unmute yourselves. If you'd like to do that, you can also participate in the chat box. And also, if you're on Twitter, these are the handles of the Right Question Institute and Luce's handle. You can use the hashtag #YVoteTool. So let's get started with some introductions. So we can actually, since we're a small group here live, do introductions by unmuting ourselves. If you're not in a place where you can unmute yourself, you can also share in the chat box, but we can get started. Whoever wants to go first.
My name is Kashana Shepard, and I'm with the YWCA of Cincinnati, and I am the shelter manager.
Wow.
Nice to meet you, Kashana.
I'm Kathy O'Connell, and I'm a volunteer with Women Voters of Cincinnati, and have been working with GCVC on this voter engagement initiative.
Welcome, Kathy.
Hi again, Justin Kirshner, co-founder of GCVC.
And Nika Owens, co-founder of Greater Cincinnati Voter Collaborative.
I'm Iman, and I'm the Education Program Associate at the Right Question Institute.
And I see Kimberly's putting in the chat. This is Kimberly Jacobs. I volunteer with the Cincinnati area League of Women Voters. Okay, welcome everybody. And so let's go to the next piece. So after the webinar, we'll be sending out an evaluation. You can download free resources at rightquestion.org, and please stay in touch with us. I'll give you more details at the end of the webinar. Luce?
Thank you, Naomi. Well, let's begin by acknowledging the original source of the work of the Right Question Institute. So our work was not developed in a think tank or in a university. It was developed out of work that my co-director Dan Rostein and I were doing in the field. Back in 1990, we were working with parents in a small community in Lawrence, where I still live. And we were working in a dropout prevention program. And as we worked with the families, they told us not once, but about 1,000 times that they were not going to the schools because they didn't even know what questions to ask. And when we heard that they had a challenge, an obstacle with asking questions, you can guess what we did. We came up with a list of the questions we thought that they should be asking, to learn that it was not about giving them the questions. When we gave the questions, rather than helping, we built dependency. And every time that they had an issue, they used to come back and say, what should I ask? So the work was about building the skill so they could ask questions in all kinds of settings and situations. And the parents showed us that that was the right way to go, because they began to apply the skill of question asking in many different settings. When they were going to the doctor, when they were looking for jobs, when they were problem solving in the community, among other applications. So the lesson here was that there was a need for building this skill, and for the past 30 years or so, that's what we have been doing, distilling what is essential to help people ask their own questions, but also make connections with the issues affecting them and decisions affecting their lives. And the work that began with the insight from parents has grown over time. So right now there are applications to the classroom with a book that we have called Make Just One Change, and the book has been translated in about 5 different languages. And there are studies from the National Institutes of Health showing the value of patients asking questions, especially uh, patients from low-income communities. There are applications by the Library of Congress, the National Science Foundation. We just facilitated a conference the past 2 weeks with a group of people working in engineering and higher education. So there are many, many applications. And of course, there is the application to voting. And in voting, we worked back in 2004, in 2008, and then we came back very strong with the elections of 2020.
And so most of you will be familiar with what we present next, which is how we see and approach the problem. And the problem is that the lower the income level of potential voters, the less likely they are to vote. And there's been lots of studies on this and how it can be exacerbated in local and midterm elections. And that is why we focus particularly on people who are low propensity voters, focus on under-resourced communities where people rely on needed government services. So that will be the focus of the Why Vote tool. And the Why Vote tool has been adapted to many different audiences. But what you'll see today focuses on services that people need. So what is our voter engagement strategy? It's a very simple process to develop a sense of urgency and motivation to vote. And we'll be going through a tool, which is actually a process that you can walk people through. What's different about this strategy? It's a complementary strategy. It can be used, I think I said before, as I said before, in existing efforts to engage voters, and also whatever voter engagement work that you're doing, either as a direct service provider in a nonprofit, reaching voters directly. And it focuses on having people name for themselves the value of voting as opposed to being told what to do or what to think.
Okay, so here is the tool. So as you can see, it is very simple. So what we're going to do now is to have an experience. We will walk through the tool. Excuse me. Okay, so let's begin by looking at some examples of government services. And I have a list here: housing, income support, healthcare, schools, jobs, courts, children, adult education, and neighborhoods. So just take a minute and take a look at the different areas and what is under each one of them. And let's think now about which 3 services are most important to people you work with or who live in your communities. And if you don't see a service that you think is most important to them, you can add it to the list or keep it in mind as we move through the process. Okay, so choose 3 services and write them in the chat box, please.
And as people are writing the services, I'll read them out.
Yes, and make sure that you share with all presenters and attendees.
So Mika says job training. And homeless services. Justin says income support and courts. Kashana, housing and courts, and Kathy, courts and jobs.
Okay, so all very important services. Okay, so let's look now at the role of elected officials. Elected officials make decisions that affect these services. By voting, people you work with or in your community can have a say in who's making these decisions. Now, let's think for a second about why would it be important for people to see for themselves the connection between services they receive and decisions elected officials make. Think about why would it be important for people to see for themselves the connection between services they receive and decisions elected officials make. Think about it and write your thoughts or your response in the chat box. Make sure that you share with all presenters and attendees. And again, Naomi will be reviewing some of your comments.
All right. So self-autonomy in this decision-making or voting process. They become more invested in their community. And again, if you're watching along, you can go through this yourself and answer these questions for yourselves. It would help people feel they could have an impact by voting to choose elected officials. Might want to learn more about their elected officials. Great, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so moving along, let's think about what questions you think they might have about actually voting. What questions do you think they might actually have about actually voting? And the way to do this is to ask as many questions as you can. Do not judge on whether it's a good or bad question. Don't try to answer the question. So ask as many questions as you can and write them in the chat box.
So what questions do you think the people or communities you serve might have about actually voting? And I'll read them out. Where do I begin? Where should they go to vote? Do I have to do jury duty? Is it hard to register? When is it? How long will it take? Can I vote as someone who has served time in jail or prison? How can my vote change anything? Can I vote? Where do I go to vote? What if I can't read? Will my vote be made public? What do I need to bring? Will my vote count? Any other questions that you think they might have about voting? Who should I vote for? When do we vote? What if I don't have transportation? Great, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. And we could go on and produce more questions, but we need to move on. Thank you. All right, so you have done a lot of work in a short period of time. You thought about government services that affect people's lives, reflected on the connection between services and decisions elected officials make, and asked questions people might have about voting. So let's think about what did you learn or what thoughts do you have now? And I would like you to open your mics and share. So, what did you learn, or what are some thoughts that you have now?
It's really important to highlight the values that people have rather than forcing a position or an individual or a more tangible thing onto them.
Thank
I
you.
think it's also hard in a way not to assume that people know more about voting than they do, and that it may seem like a very difficult process that they don't know how to start.
Thank you.
Being in this group setting, I learned more about other considerations and questions that I wouldn't have been able to imagine otherwise.
Thank you.
I continue to be fascinated with the whole process of asking the question because it makes you invested already. And even someone coming to this space that is registered voters and am a voter, I still get excited about even looking at those choices and options. And it just reaffirms my value of why this is important. So,
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to share? Great. So let's move on, Naomi. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's spend a couple of minutes looking at the components of the YVO tool and why it works. As you were able to see, it is a very simple 5-step process that allows people to know for themselves the value of voting. And it helps develop a sense of urgency to participate and vote. It is a nonpartisan strategy that encourages all people to vote, but does not encourage people to vote for a specific candidate. So let's stop here for a second and let's think about what do you see that is different about this simple strategy or process? What do you see that is different?
Kathy, I think you're muted.
Trying to unmute.
Oh, there we
Did
go.
you want us to unmute, Luz?
Yes, you can unmute yourself.
Okay. I think it's that you're not telling people why they should vote. You're helping them connect with why voting might be in their interest, why it might help them in their lives.
I echo what Kathy said.
Okay, so it allows people to get to their own conclusions about why should they do it.
So Luce, this was the third bullet that I didn't add to that slide. It also gives people space to ask questions and identify obstacles to voting.
Yeah, thank you. All right. So, so here is the tool again. It is a simple two-pager. You know that often when you are working on voter engagement, you have like simple materials to give people. And right now, the copy that we have is in color also, that makes it very attractive. All right. So the first step in the process is to review a range of services that are important to people. So in this first page, they will be able to make the connection, and they will see some relevance between what you are trying to get them to think about and their own lives. And then here they develop the skill of prioritizing, because they will have to look at all these services, think about them, and think which ones are most important for their needs. And prioritization is a skill that they can use in many different settings. And then after that, rather than giving them lots of information, we just provide a small amount of information, not to overwhelm them. Decision elected officials or decision makers make decisions that affect all these services. By voting, you can have a say in who's making those decisions. So very often people are not aware of the different decisions that people they elect can make. So this brings new awareness of the importance of voting. And then they are prompted to think about the reasons for voting. So rather, again, than telling them, why should you vote, or if you don't vote, this is what will happen, it is about giving them the time and space to get to their own conclusion. And then there is the question asking component of the tool, the questions about being able to vote. And right here, when you use this process, you will become aware of how much people know, what they don't know, and what they need to know, rather than you deciding, oh, they need to get information about the hours of voting, or where to vote, or how to get there. And those might be questions that people ask, but rather than giving them the information based on what you want to give, the important thing here is to prompt them to ask their own. Why? Because if you work that way, it is more likely that they will internalize the information that you are giving afterwards. And here is a list of the questions we have heard. Can I bring my kids with me? What if I don't know what to do? Can I get help? What if I make a mistake? Will I get punished? So some of these questions are different from the questions that initially we assume that people will ask. The last two questions are around experiences that people have had when they deal with institutions. If they make a mistake, for example, if you receive services from the welfare office or from other institutions, you usually get punished if you make a mistake. So that's a fear that people have. And I can tell you that from my experience years ago navigating systems. All right, so, and the last step is to reflect. And in reflection, what you want people is to go back and think about the work that they did, how they can apply it further, why is important. And we don't give any leading questions. We leave it completely open, so they will think about what they got from the process rather than naming it for them. So again, what you are doing is turning the thinking over to your participant. And I was wrong when I said that that was the last step, because the last step is really to connect people with more information. So if your organization is the one leading the process and you have information that you can give people, you do it. If not, you refer people to other organizations who are doing the work and who have resources. All right. So now, what are your thoughts on the YVO tool? What
And
are
Luz,
your thoughts?
should people unmute themselves or share in the chat?
They should unmute themselves.
I
I
think
guess
it's a very eye-catching type of tool that would be helpful when working with our clients, just to get them thinking about it. Um, Maybe some of them have never even thought about voting, or why they should vote, or if their vote, would count. So I think this is a great tool to get them really thinking about it, and how the different systems affect them.
Thank you.
I think the
I guess
diverse. Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
I was going to say, I guess mine is partly a question that I have after looking at it again. And that is, does it work in both individual, one-on-one and with a group? Are people comfortable in a group to share their thoughts? That's sort of what I would be wondering about as you would try to use it. How do you make people most comfortable?
Thank you. We may address that question, specific questions that you have later in the session.
I think the diversity of services are great, because someone usually can connect with one of those from a personal standpoint or even a familial standpoint.
Thank you.
I guess I also love the fact that we could go in with what we thought all the issues were. And if you talk to enough voters or potential voters, you might find that very different things were on their minds, or, that they could help us know better what's on more voters' minds or more potential voters' minds.
Thank
I
you.
really liked how it's not patronizing. And I'm at RQI, but this is my first time really going through the tool. And I could have guessed that, but I'm just like, this even puts me at ease. It makes sure that no questions are trivial and validates everyone's concerns going in. So I really like how it levels that for everyone.
Thank you.
Great. So there's some great thoughts and questions that I think we want to address as we go in this next section, but it's great to hear them now, to hear what you all are thinking about. Thank you for sharing. So I'm going to now talk a little bit about how we categorize the changes that we see in people when they go through the process, when they go through this process, or they go through the process of formulating their own questions. And we generally see three types of changes. We see cognitive changes, or changes in what people know, affective changes, or changes in how people feel, and behavioral changes, or changes in what people are able to do. And so to give you examples of what we mean when we say by cognitive, affective, and behavioral, these are examples of cognitive changes. This is from Angie, who is in Concord, New Hampshire. It's at the welfare office that we learn our voice doesn't count. But after the Right Question Institute's workshop, I see that our voices do count and we need to vote. So there's a cognitive change in understanding that her voice counts. Another person who is an adult learner in Indiana said, I see that if I don't vote, then other people are going to keep on making decisions for me. This gives me a chance to have a say in who's going to be making those decisions. Another example of a change in what people know. Some examples of affective changes, or changes in how people feel. I have never voted. I feel really strong about voting now. It would make a difference. It made me feel that voting is very important so your voice can be heard. So these are also quotes from adult learners. I believe there were 10 different states, but all of these are from folks who are in adult education programs. And then finally, examples of behavioral changes. I think it is really important to do the right of vote, and I will vote for the next presidential election. I don't think I have ever, and this is a quote from an adult education teacher in Pennsylvania, I don't think I have ever had a student who has voted before. After doing the workshop, many students actually voted. They came back really proud. They went to the county elections and voted for the school board. It actually makes a difference. So that's how we categorize the changes. And I can talk a little more about the question you asked, Kathy, in a bit about whether you do this in one-on-one settings, whether it works in group settings, and basically how people have taken this strategy and run with it and made it their own and made it work for their settings. And in that vein, we're going to introduce what will be the Cincinnati tool, the tool for the city council elections. But first, a little background. We actually worked last year with somebody who is a reentry specialist, so people coming, reentering after being incarcerated. And he was doing voter engagement work in addition to his regular work. And he was in Georgia and he spoke at churches, he did other outreach, and basically worked with us to adapt the tool for the Georgia runoff election in January. And so he wanted a version of the tool that spoke specifically to issues that people were concerned about in Georgia, and also connected explicitly to decisions that senators were making. And so you can see there, it's a little hard to see, but I can send this, the link to this tool around afterwards. But he added, for example, COVID-19 category, testing and vaccine access, stimulus checks. There were particular concerns about closure of hospitals in Georgia, and so we added that under healthcare. There was the category of criminal justice reform, including appointment of judges, and then another category for people to fill in. And instead of just which 3 services are most important to you, it became which 3 issues or services are most important to you. There's other versions of this tool, but wanted to give you a sneak peek, a preview of the tool that was the adaptation that we're working on with you all for Cincinnati. And so again, it's which 3 issues or services are most important to you. And there's categories on transportation, again, on COVID-19, on the environment, on voter access. And so this isn't a finished product, but just to let you know that you'll have a tool that is specific to the city council elections. And on the back, on the second page, there'll be a little more information for people who don't necessarily know what the city council does. So city council makes decisions that affect all these services and issues. They can decide to cut or provide funding, protect or eliminate services. By voting, you can have a say in who's making those decisions. And so we try and keep the language on the Why Vote tool and this adaptation as well very accessible. As you saw, we did work in adult education programs, and so want to keep all the language accessible, and also are hoping to do more translations, but do have a translated version in Spanish of the Why Vote tool. And then finally, where Luz showed that you could connect people to services or voter registration efforts, we can connect people to specific voter efforts in Cincinnati. And so this is the information that will be on the bottom of the tool. So let's see, we'll pass it off to Luz for some suggestions for integration.
Yeah. So one of the challenges in developing the tool was to try to design it in the simplest way possible. And we worked very hard on that. So, and you can use it as a script and with community volunteers. at a family centers. If you are doing door knocking, this can be, you can use the tool to engage whoever opens the door. If there are direct services organizations that want to allow you to engage voters, such as food banks or other direct services organizations, you can use the tool. You can do a workshop using the tool, and you can also share it at places of worship, and there you might be able to do a workshop as well. And just be aware that we are coming out of the workshop model. So back in 2004 and in 2008, we used to teach people how to facilitate workshops using our process. And it was a bit different because it was more about asking questions about elected officials. This tool, what it does is that it engages people very quickly, and then it allows them to think, and then you have opportunities to give information or to refer them. So you can use it in different places, but one of the things that we realized last year, as soon as COVID hit, was that people could not do workshops anymore. There was no time for the workshops. We were trying to engage people in the field to share our strategy, and everybody had no time because they were so concerned with what was going on. So we decided to develop a tool that was accessible, that you can share in all these places that I'm showing you. But if what you want to do is to facilitate a workshop, you do that as well. And last year, some of the people who participated in our webinars went, right away, they facilitated workshops in their community. So you don't need a lot. Plus, we have other resources in our website that can help you integrate the process into the work that you are doing. So, and this is a good segue, Naomi. So let's spend 1 minute and think about how could you use this tool in your work or in your community. Just think about it for 1 second, and then unmute yourself and share. What are some ideas that you have that we didn't share or have not shared?
Definitely day-to-day canvassing out in neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Kathy, I think you're muted.
Okay, sometimes it takes 2 clicks. I was thinking the same as Justin. And since I don't work in an organization, environment, be probably at an event where you're trying to register voters or knocking on doors. That would be most useful for me.
Thank you.
I could see my agency looking to maybe do it in a group setting as well as individual setting with case managers and clients. They can do it on a one-on-one basis. And then for even for activities or something like that in a group setting with clients as well.
Thank you, Kachana. So as you can see, we are not being prescriptive on how you can use it, because some ideas will come up as you work in your community about different ways in which it can be integrated. You might be able to engage other people in sharing the tool as well. And I know that that's part of what you are trying to do, because that's why you are recording the presentation.
Great. So we're going to move into giving you a little bit more information about how to use the tool, and then we'll wrap up and have more of an open discussion. So Luce, do you want to take this part?
Sure. All right. So there is a small shift in practice when you are sharing this tool. And it is a small shift, but that's not the way that we are used to work. So initially, it is like when you are trying a new recipe, it will be a bit difficult, but as you use it more and more, it will become second to nature. So it is not about giving people lots of information about voting at the beginning of the conversation. It is just about giving a small amount of information to keep their focus. And you know that when you try to give a lot of information and you're trying to engage someone, the people are paying attention to you, but they are trying to run away very often. So it is not about telling them that they should vote or trying to convince them to do so. It is about allowing them to get to their own conclusion about why should they vote. And it is not about deciding what information to provide. It is about allowing them to set up the agenda about what they want to know based on their questions. And who was it, Naomi, who said something around this point?
I
Someone
don't
said
remember.
something. Yes.
Somebody here said it.
So when you allow them to set up the agenda already, you get their attention and you are engaging them.
Great. So the next slide is some best practices, or what we recommend in using the tool. And Luce, jump in if I'm missing anything here.
Sure.
But if possible, we recommend that you lead people through the step-by-step process. And one cardinal rule is that you're presenting this to them so that they can do the thinking for themselves. So you're not telling them what to think, feel, or do. And that includes in the question asking piece. Often we have people who suggest what questions people want to ask. And our suggestion is to not do that, but to let people come up with as many questions as they can, whether that's one question or 10 questions, and let them set the agenda. If you are going to give them information related to voting, a polling place, registration, et cetera, which I imagine most of you watching this webinar will be doing, do it after guiding the participant through all of the steps of the process. And then finally, customize and build it into your work. And you know best about your setting and community. And I know Mika had to run, but I think we learned from Mika. Mika had originally reached out to us because she had been in a webinar last year, and she used the YVote tool and made it her own. And she used it to have conversations with people in the process of registering them. And so she could talk more about how you can kind of make this your own and use it as a script rather than a very strict set of guidelines. Anything that I missed, Luce?
No. But I think that those points are very important, especially when you are introducing others to the tool, because they have not gone through the experience. Or, it will be important for you to walk them through and allow them to think through the different steps of the tool, because that way it will be easier for them to be able to share it with others.
Great. And this is just an extra emphasis on what we said at the end, which is that we learn from people in the field doing this work. And what we've learned is that people know best how to integrate the resources into their work. So I'll leave you all with that. So I do want to leave you. We're going to do question and answers and finish up here. I just want to make sure. Okay. So before we do that, I'd like to leave you just with a quote from Septima Clark, who is a 20th century educator whose work and whose quotes help us explain how we see individual skill building and inquiry as connected to democracy. So you might recognize the person on the right, that's Rosa Parks. And on the left here is Septima Clark, who is a teacher, originally a teacher in the South Carolina public schools, who is fired for being a member of the NAACP. And so she actually went on to establish what were called the citizenship schools, where she and others would teach adults to read and write to help them register and vote. And so that's Septima in the middle, and that's her cousin Bernice in the background, and these are the citizenship schools. And what Septima said was, we need to be taught to study rather than to believe, to inquire rather than to affirm. And her work has helped us to articulate this connection between investing in individual people's skills and the ability to advocate using questions and democracy. So wrapping up, oh, it's out of order here. Sorry about that. So we have an evaluation for you all to complete. It doesn't have to be now, but I'll leave the link in the chat box. Look out for an email with this recording and also resources and links, as I said, to resources in the YVote tool in both Spanish and English. And let us know how you and others are using the tool. So we'll open it up for your questions, and I'm going to leave the link to the evaluation here in the chat box. But Luz, maybe you could start with, I think what Kathy had asked a little while ago, which is wondering about how it works one-on-one versus in a group, and whether people are comfortable using or sharing in a group setting.
Absolutely. It works well with individuals. Working with individuals is important. It could be a missed opportunity for them to make the connections and develop urgency to vote if you don't do it. The work with individuals, the way that this works, there is some sort of safety when you facilitate this process, because people bring their own thinking. And for example, when they choose the services, it doesn't mean that there is something wrong on identifying any of the services available. Sometimes a service can be important to me because my neighbor needs it. So I think that the process is very safe. You are not testing people. And if you use the you will not be probably using the chat, because people will need some sort of training on that, but it is likely that people will build a sense of community and will learn from each other. So with anything that you do with the tool, it is not a test, and you encourage people to share it, whatever they are thinking about. And again, the question formulation process is something that we have been using for many years. And one advantage of doing it in a group setting is that people can learn from each other and build questions upon a question that has been asked already. And that doesn't occur in the work with individuals. In the work with individuals, you're going to have to probably prompt them further, and you're going to have to wait as well. When you are working with a group, they help each other, and it is likely that they will come up with more questions. When you are working with an individual, they might get a bit stuck, but it is there where you are, what else do you want to know? You ask a question about who to vote for. What else do you want to know about that? So there are ways of prompting people to keep them engaged and keep them thinking and working. And one important thing is that, if they don't produce a lot of questions when they are working as individuals, do not worry much about that. because basically what you are doing is giving them license to ask, that it is okay to ask and to pose questions. So we have videos in our website that can allow you to see how these processes are facilitated. But I will say, do what we did with you. We turned the thinking over and we didn't feed you with information. That's exactly the way that it will work with individuals or in a group setting. And the last thing I'm going to say, and you're going to have to be careful because I have problems in shutting down, but the only thing you don't do when working in a group setting is to validate some of the contributions in an unequal way. So probably you observe how we validated your contributions. And I'm not testing you, but we use the word thank you quite often, and we didn't say, great comment or great idea. You have to acknowledge all contributions equally, because if you don't, some of the participants might disengage.
And just to add one final comment on this, last year we had somebody in the 2020 election who actually did this as a workshop she was a parent leader in Los Angeles. She had a community workshop and did the workshop in Spanish, and she just had the YVote tool up on a PowerPoint screen and walked everybody through it in a group. So that's just one example. Other questions or comments? Okay, well, feel free to leave them in the chat, and also I'll copy and paste our emails into the chat so you can also have those. And we would love for you to take a couple minutes to fill out the evaluation. It helps us improve our sessions, including if you've received this as a recording. The evaluation will be open, and I will pass it off to you, Kathy, I think now.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you and Luz for sharing the Why We Vote tool and giving, I think, an excellent idea of how we can use it here in Cincinnati. I mean, it's just a terrific tool. And for those who are listening to the presentation, our vision for using the tool is to fine tune the issues for Cincinnati specifically by talking to prospective voters and continue to train people in how to use it in their voter engagement work across many local organizations. That's the goal. Some of you listening will join in this work and can let the Greater Cincinnati Voter Collaborative know of your interest via the information on getting involved that Justin's going to share with us right now.
Thank you, Kathy. And I echo Kathy's comments. Naomi, Iman, Luz, thank you for being here with us to educate our community about the Why Vote tool. It truly is incredible, and hopefully it will change the game as it relates to voter engagement. To Kathy's point, the Greater Cincinnati Voter Collaborative has been around about 2 years, and we'd love, for that collective civic impact work to continue. So if you're interested, we are in the process of finalizing our revamped website, which will be at cincyvotes, CINCYVOTES.com, and it should be accessible when you are viewing this website. It has opportunities to help drive voters to the polls who lack transportation, register voters, get involved in our working groups that are diverse and reach a variety of constituencies. So again, we'd love to have you, and we thank you for tuning in this evening. Have a good night, everybody.